but we will try. Oh, damn it. Really? Hello friends! So today is the day where I am starting work on the Reformation Belgium dupe that I've been planning to do for a while. I actually got contacted by one of you guys, one of my followers here on YouTube / also Instagram, contacted me and she asked me whether I've seen this dress before and whether I would be interested to create a tutorial for the pattern drafting and for the sewing of this dress, or at least for something that looks a lot like this dress. And I was totally up for the challenge. I have not seen the dress before. I looked it up online and man, do I love this dress. It is absolutely gorgeous. It is so beautiful, especially in this white linen with the lemon print. Totally my vibe. It is definitely a lot more structured than the dresses that I've done in the past. It is almost like it has a corset structure to it. The bodice is very defined and it has a few specifically placed seams that make it fit the female form perfectly. It also has some extended, slightly poofy sleeves, and it has a nice midi skirt with a slit and some ruffles on the bottom. It also has a sheared back with a zip. So it's sheared and it has a zip, which is something that I'm not entirely sure about yet, whether this is something that I want to incorporate. I do understand why the shirring is there in combination with the zip, because it allows the dress to grow with you if it has to. Say you are in Tuscany and you're eating a huge bowl of pasta, you want your dress to extend a little bit, maybe at least. So this is, I think, why the shirring is there. The question whether or not I'm going to incorporate the shirring in the back depends on the fabric that I'm using. Now the fabric that I'm using is this linen. I tried to stay as close to the original as I could in terms of the vibe of the print, and I found this beautiful, very almost minimalist, I want to say, floral pattern. Now the question is how this fabric is going to take to the shirring and whether or not we can do it on this linen. The first step for me to recreate this pattern is always to have a good long look at the dress and then draw it out on my iPad, and this is what I've already done. I'm gonna, make that image appear here magically. I already had a good think about what my pattern pieces would have to look like in order to recreate that dress. I think I'm going to do a combination of drafting the pattern on my mannequin and then also putting it flat on paper and drawing it out again, measuring everything to make sure it fits me before I cut out anything. So this is definitely going to be an extended process to get to the final product, because I want this to look as close to the original as it possibly could. Right, so without further ado, I'm going to show you now how I draft the pattern on my mannequin. Do you know what's the worst thing? When you do a whole chunk of work and then you realize your phone is out of battery or storage, or you just didn't press record. All of those things above have happened to me in the past, and one of them has happened just now. So anyways, I'm gonna redo everything I just did because I'm determined. I'm determined to show you how I do this. So we're grabbing some tape and we're gonna start. So the first thing you need to do, we'll do is we'll add a straight line to the center, horizontally to the center of your bust. So like that. There's a seam in the dress here, which we will consider. The next thing is the seam below the bust here. which has a slight curve to it. It kind of like tips here in a right angle to the center front, which we will cut on the fold. So we are going to basically create this whole pattern, only half of it, and then we're going to cut everything on the fold so it allows for symmetry and for everything to be even and nice. So we want that seam to hit in a 90-degree angle to the center front fold, because otherwise we're going to have a weird tip here, which we don't want. We then are going to lead it down a little bit like that, and then upwards again on the side, like this. For the neckline itself, we are also going to create a very slight slanted curve with the center front meeting in a horizontal line, a 90-degree line, and then going upwards a little bit like that, and then going back down towards the side seam like this. Now this is basically 2 pieces for the bust. Now what I've seen on the image is that these pieces need to allow a little bit for the armhole. So we are now going to tape where the sleeve is going to hit. So say it starts here, goes down like this, and it meets relatively far on the outer edge of the bust, which allows for this like squarish looking neckline. So say this is where the sleeve meets, and it then in a curve goes down like that, and I want it to meet the seam in the center of the bust like that. I also will now immediately extend this line because I know that I'll need it later. So I'm going to finish up this armhole like that, so we have the finished curve. Now we don't need this piece of tape here, so I can remove it. Okay, so this is what we have so far. The bodice at the torso has a seam here. As I said earlier, we're going to cut the pieces on the fold, so there is not going to be a seam here, but there is a seam here, which allows for this corset-like structure of the dress. So I want the seam to start underneath the apex of the bust. So we're going to place it right here, relatively straight down, like that. Okay, now we are going to consider where the dress form meets on the side. We're going to assume that this is the side seam. The back of the dress has a very slight downward V shape. I'm going to make this even more dramatic than what I can see on the images from the model, and I'm going to place it a little bit lower than what I see there, just because it's my personal liking. It goes down like this, and again where there is this line here on my dress form, I'm going to consider this to be my center back seam where the zip is going to be later. Now for the insert of the sheared element, I will also add a line here, which is going to be a seam, which then goes down like this. Now, I will also consider where the hips of my dress form start to be the natural end point of all of these pieces. I've extended this a bit because my torso is a bit higher, and this should usually fit me. Cool, so that's what our pattern pieces look like for this dress. Now the next step for me is to grab some baking sheets, because my usual craft paper roll would be a bit too stiff to mold it to the dress form. I'm going to use those baking sheets. They're easier to fold and to mold to this dress form. So I'm just going to grab a piece that is roughly big enough for the area I want to cover, and I will also need some pins to do this part. I'm simply placing the paper on the dress form, and I'm trying to pin it down as good as I can without any folds in it. So this is now on my mannequin, on the piece that I am working on first. And then just grabbing a pencil and following the lines of the tape to kind of mark where I need to cut. And once I've done that, I can take off the paper or cut it on my mannequin, whatever I feel is easiest. And then cut that piece. And this is my first pattern piece. I also marked some of the important spots on this. So the center front fold, I just indicated that this is up and this is down, and this is the armhole. So this is our first pattern piece. And I'm going to repeat all of those steps now with the rest of this. So see you in a moment. Good morning, dear friends. It's not actually the morning, it's the afternoon. I don't know why I said that. It is the next day, however. So what I ended up with yesterday was basically all of my pattern pieces in craft paper. So they are more durable and I can reuse them in the future. So that's what that looks like, and that is just the bodice. What I will have to do next is to create the skirt pattern. Now the skirt pattern is relatively simple. I'm going to show you how I do it in a sec. The only thing that I will have to keep in mind is that there are two seams in the middle of the thighs. One of those seams is going to become a slit. Obviously also we will have to cut out some ruffles for the skirt, but I don't think that I will actually draft the pattern for these in paper because it's basically just a strip of fabric that is maybe double the circumference of the skirt. So that is what I will have to do next, and then I hope that I can get to cutting out all of my pieces today and maybe start sewing, but I'll see about that. The difficulty that presents itself is that I will have to test the shirring on the linen that I'm going to use to see what it does to the fabric and whether it works or not. And I will also have to interface all of my bodice pieces. I'm doing that because I want to give the fabric a bit more structure so it holds itself up a little bit better to kind of like act a little bit like a corset. And I'm going to do that by using this double-sided interfacing. I think there are probably better options out there, options that only are sticky on one side and have like a fabric basically on the other side, but I don't have that here right now, and I feel like I should use what I have to reduce waste. So I'm going to use that, and I'm going to make this white cotton the other side of my fabric sandwich. So basically we have the shell fabric, we have the interfacing, and then as a third layer we have this white cotton fabric. So that is my plan. I will have to test out all of these things today and hopefully get all of my pieces prepared so that I can probably start sewing tomorrow. This is something that I always hated. I always hated when somebody told me, oh, you know, preparation is key. You have to be super prepared to start any project, and then the sewing is a breeze. But it's actually true. You know, if you get the preparation right, then sewing the piece is going to be so quick and simple and easy. So I'm trying to basically, you know, be my own best advisor and prepare really well before I actually start sewing. So let's do it.
I used my corset top as a base for the skirt pattern. I used the seam of the corset to understand where the seams in the front skirt would have to go and mark that point on the waistline. To start the pattern, I simply drew out a perpendicular line to the edge of my craft paper, which would be the center front on the fold. On that line, I measured 1/4 of my waist circumference, create a slight waist curve. I continued by measuring downwards about 23 centimeters from the waistline, creating the hip line perpendicular to the center front. On that line, I measured 1/4 of my hip circumference plus 2 to 3 centimeters for comfort. To determine the length of the skirt, I measured down from my waist to just under my knee and used that measurement as the length of the skirt. The height of the ruffles, which was about 20 centimeters, will be added to that to create a midi length skirt. For the sleeve, draw out a simple T. The stem of the T is the height of your sleeve, from your elbow to the tip of your shoulder. The bar on top is the beginning of your armhole curve, which in total width should match the distance between your bustier and the back of your corset top. Add 5 to 10 centimeters to that to allow for some extra width for the elastic. To create a symmetrical shape, cut out the T in a square, fold it in half along the stem of the T, and cut the curve on the fold.
You guys, look at all of these pattern pieces. This is ridiculous. And all of these here are doubled because the lining is underneath and the shell as well. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 12 pieces, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. 24 pieces of this pattern. This is no joke. So the next step will be to sew this seam here and these seams here to overturn the shell with the lining fabric, and then I can sandwich the interfacing in between and press it so I have a nice crisp neckline, and then also interface all of these other pieces in the process. And yeah, that's already a lot, so let's do that.
I gave the interfacing a try on a small scrap of fabric and it turned out really well. It was really hard to rip the pieces apart when I tried, and I was happy with the sturdiness of them. Unfortunately, the shirring did in fact not work on the linen, so this element of the dress will have to be altered and kept as a simple additional panel in the back of the corset.
So I'm gonna grab the top part of the bustier, so to speak, which looks like this. Now I'm going to grab the lining, place the two pieces right sides together, and give this a straight stitch. I'm going to add a few slits here to the seam allowance, so when we overturn all of this, there is no wonky bulging or anything like this. Like so, and give it a press. I'm also going to understitch the seam allowance. Okay, so now I understitched the seam allowance, and now I'm actually going to press it so it lies flat. So what the understitching does is it helps to make sure that from the outside you don't actually ever see the lining, but only the shell fabric, because it kind of like pulls it into the piece and backwards. So this way it's always clean from the outside. I am going to grab the same piece that I cut from the interfacing, and now I'm going to try and place it in between the shell and the lining so that it meets at the top seam, and then put that back down. And now I'm going to give this a good long press to make sure that the interfacing fuses together the two layers of fabric. Okay, now these pieces are fused together, they don't come apart. And now I'm going to simply cut back anything that's not supposed to be here, like this white space here and here. And the first piece is done. I'm now going to repeat the exact same steps with the back pieces, so we have a clean edge at our lower back. Okay, so I interfaced all of my bodice pieces. They are looking good and ready to be sewn up. They look crisp, they have nice edges. So that's the upper bust panel like this. The only piece that I actually did not interface is this one, which is the center back panels, and they meet like this, and in between there's going to be the zip. So the next step is actually to assemble the bodice, which is really exciting. But first I need a break. We are now going to assemble the bodice. The first thing I will do is to place my pattern piece and make a tiny little marking where the top piece has to meet the bottom piece. So I'm gonna make a marking here, and I'm gonna make a marking here. Okay. Now the difficulty here will probably be to line this up so it meets nicely and it cups the way it should. So I will also probably want to know exactly where my center points are, where the center front is. Now, starting from the center, aligning these 2 points, I'm going to start pinning all of this together. Now this is going to be, if it works, very, very satisfying to watch, I think, because this is kind of like the showstopper of the dress. This like paneled 2-piece bustier. I think it's going to look really nice. So if this comes out true to the original in terms of what it looks like, then we know we're on a good path. So the markings match up. So this is slightly curvy, as you can see. It kind of lifts up this way, which is good because once we overturn it, I think it's going to form 2 cups. So now I'm going to sew along this line about 1 centimeter inwards, because that's how much seam allowance I gave myself. Okay, now I gave this a press. It looks pretty good to me, and if we need to make it more cuppy, there's going to be the opportunity to kind of just sew in more here and remove a little bit of that look that's going on, but I will be able to determine that later once I've assembled more of the top. Up next, I'm going to assemble the bottom of the front bodice, which is this. So placing those pieces right sides touching like that, adding a few needles on the side. Okay, adding a straight stitch on both sides. Okay, now this is put together. Now we have our back pieces here, which these are not interfaced. I'm now going to sew these princess seams in the back, trying to match them up as good as I can. Okay, now the key here is to start the seam exactly at this cross point of the one piece and the other piece. So when we open it, it looks continuous. Now these are done. Looking good. The question now is what's up next? I swear, if this is too small for me, I'm gonna kill someone. It looks a bit small right now. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just making that up. What I will do is I will overlock all of these seams so they look nice and clean, because the place to make any alterations will be the side seams, so these seams won't change anyway. And if I do that, then I can attach the top of the front bodice to the bottom of the front bodice. So that's the plan. I mean, I just had dinner, so I'm surely not in my best shape, but still. Let me take some measurements. That is too small. Really? That is tiny. That is tiny. That is actually properly tiny. Like how did this happen? How did this happen? Can anyone tell me? This is like 5 centimeters too small for me. Why did I not measure my pattern? Why is that thing so small? Okay, let's forget about that for a sec. We are going to continue and figure that out later. Okay. It's fine. It's fine. We'll get there. We'll make this with me. good thing is all of these pieces match up perfectly, so I did some good work, just not for myself, potentially. Potentially not for myself. How sad. How sad is this if I couldn't wear this? Straight stitch. Okay, press it. Okay, so now what I'm definitely going to do is to sew a little bit more inwards here to give it more of a curve. Okay. Okay, you guys, look at this. This fits like a glove and it meets the line that I taped earlier exactly. So this is a complete success, I would say. I can also see that it is going quite a bit over the side seam of the mannequin, which gives me hope for it to fit me. And I'm now going to join the front and the back on the side seams, and then I can probably give it a first try. So, grabbing the back pieces and pinning the side seams. Okay, so it appears that I was very lucky. Very, very lucky. It fits just so. So you remember the thing that I said with a bowl of pasta? Maybe I'm not gonna eat pasta in that. Maybe a salad will do. This actually looks good, I think. I think I'm going to improve this seam just a little bit more so there's no gaping going on here by simply removing a bit more here. And then this situation I will figure out later. But what do you think? Looks quite good to me so far. Moving on to the sleeves. I remember that the sleeves have a little elastic gather detail here, which is what keeps them on the shoulder. It's always so hard to create a tunnel for an elastic on a curved sleeve like this, but we will try. Oh, damn it. Okay, continue. Sleeves, let's repeat the pattern. No, let's remove the pattern. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to overlock these raw edges and then I will try to create these tunnels. Wish me luck. Okay, now looking at our corset, I'm trying to figure out where we actually need the tunnel and where we don't. Because if I do this, assuming we do this, then we need the tunnel to start here and also here. I'm going to try and make the tunnel as small as possible. I think I have some small elastic here, so I'm going to pin those edges in place so I'm struggling less when actually sewing. I'm trying to avoid as much warping as I can, but obviously that's not easy with a curved piece of fabric. Now this linen thankfully is quite forgiving, so let's hope for the best. Okay, so now that seemed to work and it looks nice and neat and there's no weird little pleats or anything going on. I think we're good to go. And we're good to put this into the bodice. I will now measure out how much elastic I need. I have two pieces of elastic here that are the exact same length to fit around my shoulder, hopefully, according to the mannequin. The next step will be to attach the sleeve to the bodice, and I will do that by first sewing together the side seam. Okay, so that is where the sleeve goes, and I'm gonna try and sew that in. Not too bad. Not too bad if I may say so. Yeah. Now we have the sleeve here, and I think the rest of this I can top stitch or stitch by hand. But first I will have to insert the elastic. So taking my security pins, very tiny elastic, and then trying to insert this in the tunnel like so. And I think we could actually take a different kind of elastic for this. Let us take the stronger white elastic, shall we? This is why I like to keep all my straps. I'm going to secure this with a few stitches. It is 8:45 in the evening and I'm absolutely done. Like, I'm done. I think I've been sewing now for 6 hours straight. And I just had to thread in my overlocker twice because it just unthreaded for no reason whatsoever. But I came quite far with the top. As you can see, one sleeve is more or less in, and I'm gonna do the other one tomorrow morning, and then I can continue with the skirt. And let's pray to the heavens that this thing is going to fit me when everything is said and done. Okay, good night. So it's the next day. I'm refreshed. I'm wearing makeup. I'm feeling good. Did some yoga this morning. I think it's important to take care of your body when you do a lot of work, because while sewing is definitely my creative outlet and my hobby, I also feel like it's a lot of work. So it's important to take care of yourself when you have a hobby that is that time consuming and maybe also a bit straining on your body, on your back, because you're sitting all the time. So a bit of stretching and a bit of a yoga workout in the morning is definitely a good idea, or any other kind of workout. And I'm not saying that because I'm not a very athletic person. Well, I left off yesterday after having inserted the first sleeve, so I think I'm gonna now continue with the second sleeve. Before I actually sew, look at this. This is disgusting. I realized yesterday night that my sewing machine made like weird scratchy noises, so I figured, I've had it now for a couple months, maybe I should clean it out, and I definitely should. Okay, so in my mind, we can now continue with the skirt. So this is the back skirt. We're gonna put that aside for a sec and first start with the front skirt. We have 2 panels basically. Well, what looks like 2 panels. So we have 3 in total. So these are the side pieces and then this is the center front piece. And I added notches where the slit starts about here. So I am simply going to pin together these pieces, right sides touching. Now this is the front skirt. I am now going to double check with the top to make sure that this fits. So this looks all right, and I'm going to sew exactly where these notches are. And because I want the slit to be on the left, this is the side that I'm going to sew in a stitch length of 2.5 until my mark, and then I'm going to sew the remainder with a basting stitch so I can give it a good nice press and then open it again when I need to. Okay, now I've pressed the seam allowance apart, and this is the side where I want my slit to be. So I'm going to open that back up. Now we have a nice crisp edge here and it gives us a bit of guidance. Now what I'm going to do is I will grab my back skirt pieces and I will sew the side seams next. I did give myself a bit more of a seam allowance in the center back, which hopefully will allow this skirt to fit me just right. So I just gave all of the seams a good press. So I pressed open the seam allowance for the 2 seams in the front skirt, and then the side seams I pressed towards the back. And you can see that I already made a few alterations. I removed a bit of the curve from the skirt because I don't seem to need it. Now what I'm going to do before I actually join the skirt with the top is to overlock all of these seams, because if it works and if it fits, then I don't have to go back to the stage of overlocking everything and having to take apart the top and the skirt. So I'm first going to overlock these, because for the fitting later I don't think any of these seams will change. If anything, we are going to make the dress bigger or smaller here in the center back. So these seams are good to be overlocked. Okay, So after I have now overlocked and pressed all of the seams of the skirt, I'm going to join the top and the skirt together. So I'm placing the skirt so that the good side is facing me. Then I'm grabbing my top and placing it right sides together with the skirt, checking that the seams match up, which they do, sort of, kind of, maybe. Now we can see that there's a quite big of a difference between the top and the skirt in terms of the back panel. There's a lot more space. So what I will try to do now to figure out how to make this fit me perfectly is I'm going to sew the top to the skirt with a basting stitch, and then I'm gonna give it a try. There are quite a few things wrong with this, that's for sure. This is obviously too big. So even if I pull it down like that, this is still too big. So the good thing is the skirt fits. Let's start there. The skirt looks quite perfect, and it also seems that I don't need to be too worried about the back because it fits me quite okay. So if there was a zip back here, then all of this would probably look alright, and I don't feel like I can't breathe or anything, so that's good. But then this obviously is not good, and this is something I didn't pay that much attention to. So my thinking is that I will have to take out the sleeves again and remove a little bit here like that, and then also attach the sleeves a little bit further in here. It fits better the more I move it down, so it's possible that it's just too long, the top. It's too high and it's too wide. I mean, other than that, once I make all of these alterations, I like the look of this. I think it looks nice. So maybe if I pull it down like that, so shorten the length of this. This looks awkward, I'm sure. And then remove a little something here. I think that could work. I think that's what I need to do. Okay. I've done that, I think in order to know whether this had a big enough effect, I'm going to attach the skirt again to give it another try. Okay, so I gave it another try and it's infinitely much better. It's really coming together, I think. What I'm gonna do next in order to determine what to do with this is I am going to insert the zip in the back so I get a good understanding of what the dress does once it's closed, because right now I'm just holding it together with my hands and that's not really giving me a good idea of the natural shape of the dress. Now what I'm gonna do is to give myself some guidance on where I want to sew, and I will also have a look at what kind of zip I'm going to use. Right, that's way too pink. So I have white and I have tan. Let's go with white. So this is the length of the zip, and I think I'm going to try and stick to that because it's always nice to have a lot of space to get in and out of your dress. So that's how long the opening has to be. Now I'm going to mark about 1 centimeter here, and then I'm going to try and softly move down like that. So I'm going to baste this area until the end of the zip, and then the rest I'm gonna sew with a normal stitch of about 3. Okay, so now I've just pressed the seam and now I'm gonna open it back up. I'm now going to pin the zip in before I sew it. Okay, no one was hurt. I just tried on the dress with the help of my boyfriend. It's way too big. It's way too big. I don't know what's going on. I really thought this was going to be too small. Now it's way too big. But that's definitely what I prefer. I prefer it being big because I can make it smaller. If it's too small, I cannot make it bigger. So all good. What I will do is to just pin the zip so that it makes the dress a little bit smaller, meaning moving it about here. Now I'm going to give it a first stitch and see where this takes me. Okay, you guys, that's what it looks like so far, and I'm pretty happy. I think it looks quite good. It's very comfortable in terms of size. I think it's perfect for me in terms of size. Having closed the center back didn't change anything about the gaping that's going on here, so I will have to go back in and make some changes, which I think are going to be giving this a bit more of a curve here, and that could basically fix it, I think. I think we're close to the finishing line. To finish off the slit, I'm just going to top stitch around it. Now I'm going to move on to the ruffles on the skirt. So I've cut 2 identical strips of 20 centimeters in height on the fold, which means we're talking about a total length of about 130. So we have 130 centimeters to gather to the width of the skirt. Now what I'm going to do first is to simply add some basting stitches. Okay, so now to gather the ruffles to the needed width, I'm just grabbing my dress, looking at the skirt. So this needs to be gathered so it fits this, which means we are talking about a width of 23 centimeters. So I'm tying together the 2 loose ends on one side so it doesn't open, and grabbing the 2 top threads on the other side, and then I'm starting to gather. What I will have to consider is that I haven't finished this side and that I need some seam allowance on the other side. I have now gathered all of the ruffles for the skirt, and I'm going to pin them to the skirt now. So to join the skirt with the ruffles, I'm taking the according piece and pinning it right sides together with the skirt. I'm giving myself a bit of seam allowance on the side so I can join the ruffle pieces of the front and the back skirt together. And then the same for the front. I'm going to do a simple rolling hem. So I realized that I don't need to buy a new zip, I simply need to finish off the one that I've already put in properly, which is by basically taking the zip in your hands and then pulling the fabric over the teeth of the zip, just so, and then placing a pin here. So what this does, I already finished the other side, is it gives a bit of a overlap to the fabric, which we are going to top stitch down to keep it in place, and that then hides the zip altogether, which is why it's called an invisible zipper. So if you finish it off that way, then you cannot see the teeth of the zip, which is what we want. So that's what I'm doing now. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay. I just shortened the zip, or I am actually about to shorten it like that. I locked the teeth here so they don't open, and now I'm going to just melt together the end, and that should secure it somewhat. That is done, and as you can see, the white has now disappeared between the fabric, which I'm going to give a press now to make it more flat. Okay guys, final stretch. Last thing to do, finishing off the length of the sleeves. I'm going to overlock the raw edges, and then I'm going to simply fold them over once, top stitch that, and insert another elastic. I think this one's a winner because I have not used this one in a long time. I want it to be comfortable. I don't want it to cut my flesh and give me the feeling that I need to lose some weight. So I'm gonna keep this chill, and my only safety pin if ever I lose this. It's funny how you have like a multitude of one thing and you don't take care of it because you're like, oh, I have so many, you know, and then you lose all of them, and then you're left with a single one, and this one you own and you look after it and you own it for a year or something straight, and you just don't lose it because you need it. You know, tells you something about human psychology. Now I'm just trying to sew those ends together somehow. Okay, this doesn't have to be pretty, just functional. Awesome. It's a little bit shorter than in the original, but I don't think that I mind that. Okay, so grabbing my hand needle, I'm now just going to add a few finishing touches, like sewing closed the seam allowance in the back, and then also adding some hooks and eyes in the center back to secure the top of the zip. Done.
I am sitting at this bar trying to forget all the fun we used to have. Even though I'm better and time has passed, now I wonder where your mind's at. In my dreams I pick you up, I just wanna make it right. I know all about your troubles, wanna drown into your eyes and feel your blue sky within. So deep in you, I'm blinded by your bittersweet shine. But get what you need, I'll make you feel free. Be mine tonight and feel your blue sky within. Do you think of me when you're on your way home?
This project was indeed quite challenging, but also a joy. I really think the outcome is lovely, even though some elements don't quite match the original. In the end, the bustier turned out a bit more sweethearty through the alterations process, and the sleeves are a bit different too. However, I really like the dress and I think it was an amazing project. I had a lot of fun and I also learned a lot. What do you think? I would love to see your takes on this dress. If you do make it, please tag or message me on Instagram or via email. I would love to see your results. And thank you again for my follower here on YouTube and Instagram who actually pointed me towards that dress. I really had a lot of fun making it. See you soon!